It's just about 6 o'clock on the nose. We'll give it a second. Today we're continuing our conversation about vetting. What we do to vet, we use a process called discernment. We spent Tuesday talking in depth about what is discernment and how do we do that. Let's see.
How do we discern?
Let me pull up Tuesday's definition. So discernment is taking time to learn about a person or situation fully, asking open-ended questions, and gaining a comprehensive perspective. The questions that we tackled on Tuesday was what open-ended questions can I ask? And then how do I ensure I've gathered all the necessary information before forming an opinion? And so we talked a lot about what are open-ended questions. We talked about what are opinions, how do we form them, what are good opinions or, valid opinions. And so we spent some time talking about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. How much information do you need in order to form a decent opinion?
Well, Colin Powell, as it turns out, is the one responsible for this. It's called the 40-70 rule, right? Okay. You should not make an opinion until you have at least 40% of the information gathered, but you should think about leaning into one once you're at about 70.
But how do you know if you have all 40%?
That's a good question. I think
discernment.
Discernment. You have to discern your discernment. Exactly. Don't mind us. It's humid as all get out here in New York, and while it's not hot, it's terribly hot. So
it's like that in between summer and fall.
Yes.
Yet, extreme summer humidity. It's very strange. It's like a rainforest.
Only with no trees.
There's no toucans. Where's the toucans?
Good question. Anyway, hello, and welcome to all of you who are joining us. It's lovely to see you here. I see some new faces and some familiar faces. So welcome back to those of you who are with us on the regular. How cute! Thank you for my little
team
hat.
crown.
I love that. All right. So as has been the case lately, our lovely Hurricane Master did some research for us, and I have some notes here about today. And we're going to go over some criteria for how you can tell if you have an open mind. How are you approaching a situation by an open mind? So we have the, we have the notes here in front of us. So please feel free to write in your notes, your comments, your questions, and that way we can all have a conversation together. My good friend Lace is also here. Lace came in person, but is stepped off to the other room so that they're on their phone because 3 faces in this little screen was a little bit rough. But we're happy to have her here. So anyway, so the first thing on this list is a willingness to listen. You actively listen to others without interrupting or preparing your rebuttal while they speak. Open-minded individuals are genuinely interested in understanding different perspectives rather than just waiting for their turn to respond. You have friends here.
I know. I'm like, what's going on? Someone's named Joshua Jr. I was like, wow, what a funny name to be junior to.
Yes, and I think they're speaking to you, but
that's cool.
That's neither here nor there.
But active listening.
Active listening. Let's stay clear on that, right?
We both have ADHD.
I think right. I think the idea about what I hear in this one is what we call open heart listening, right? When we talk about different levels of listening in our programming, right? We talk about just listening, then listening with an open mind, but then listening really with an open heart. The idea behind that is just like not really, just like looking like you're listening, and then paying attention, but really sort of getting involved with what it is you think you might have to say in response, right? Which about the minute you start calculating what it is you want to say in response is to the exact degree you're like not really paying attention anymore.
Yeah.
And then after that is what we call open heart listening, which is where you really put aside whatever you think you might want to say in response to really just hear what the person has to say, whatever it is. And I think there are situations more or less that make that kind of listening challenging or easier, right? If someone is expressing opinions or talking about something that you feel really challenged by, it can be a lot harder to stay open-minded and to just hear without
I'll go get the door.
Get the door.
One moment, everybody.
You know, without listening to respond, without listening with an agenda, I think that it can be hard to do that. So it's being open-minded in your listening skills. I think is a practice. It takes time to do that.
Yeah, I think what I often do. I think what I often do when I'm listening to other people is I immediately try to insert not myself into their experience, but try to imagine what they're saying and what they're explaining is their experience and how it could fit into what my experience of it could be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for the longest time...
Which is hard for me not to do.
For the longest time, I actually used to think that if I was listening to you and then there was something in my experience that I felt like I could relate to, and I felt like sharing that was my way of letting you know that I understood you or helping you feel understood. In my research and seminary, in my studies, I read a book that was really pivotal around that, especially when people are challenged, when people are sharing from a really pained place or a place of a lot of pain. It's actually one of the least helpful things you can do for someone.
Yeah, but it's not about me giving advice to them based off of what I think my experience would be. What is it then?
No, it's literally about even the idea of relating in some way, having some personal experience where you by conveying it, I honestly believed I was conveying, I understand where you're at. I had this experience also. I'm not saying anything about your experience. I'm sharing mine. I legitimately thought that was a way to be helpful. And what I later found out through these studies was that the best thing to do is to just listen without any kind of feedback.
Yeah. I don't even give feedback based off my experience.
But I
just in my head I imagine it as if it was me, and from even just doing that, it takes me away from listening to them. Yeah. And that's the key part that I don't necessarily have a conscious choice in yet, is like listening to the person to just listen to them versus listening to then input it into how it could be in my life, but not even giving a response back to them.
I see. So you sort of do it in your head.
I get unfocused. I get like logical and formula based about it.
I get it.
Unknowingly. And then I'm like, I didn't even get to listen to the last 4 sentences you said, and I have to say, can you repeat that?
Right. And I always feel bad when I do that. Yay. Yes, AB crossover episode. Yes. This all the conversation this week is about discernment and vetting and how we do that and the various ways that we go about doing that. Interesting. So people are saying that autistic people do it and that it's the only way we can show we understand. Not all, but a lot. But what I learned though is that people feel heard just by giving them your presence. People feel understood just by being witnessed, right? At least for me, I can only speak for myself. That was a really eye-opening lesson for me. And in the description in the book that I read, it talked about the difference between just being open to hearing, just listening, taking in what someone's saying, and then the only kind of feedback to say, I hear you, especially when it's coming from a painful place. Totally. I can hear what a hard time you're having, and that's it.
But the person is asking for advice,
right? And
then it's different.
Yes.
Versus you giving it automatically, and then it's like, well, I didn't ask for that. I just wanted to be heard.
But people don't know to say that. They just internalize that feeling. It's a real feeling though for people. They just internalize the part where they're like, oh, I didn't really want your feedback. I just wanted to be able to share.
Yeah, so. Especially it can come off for me like as patronizing. Like if I didn't ask for feedback or advice and I receive it and I'm like, well, I just wanted to be validated in my own words and experience. Right.
Well, unsolicited advice is a whole different thing.
True. We should have a conversation.
I have a big button about unsolicited advice. Yes, Hurricane Master, I ask if you want my feedback or opinion, or do you just want me to listen?
That's a good.
Yes, and Fatal Yours, you got it too. Like I ask. If I really feel like I have something to say, I ask and then I pause. The pause being, please say no if you do not want me to say anything. I'm totally open for you saying no. Just because I ask doesn't mean you need to say yes. And so I try to do that because I don't like unsolicited advice either. That happens to me in meetings. I'll be in a meeting and I'll share in a meeting in the course of the hour, and then somebody after that meeting will walk right up to me and go, "Oh yeah, about that thing that you said, and I and blah blah blah, and you," and I'm like, and I literally like I glaze over and I wait for like a breath, and I'm like, "Hey, thanks," and I walk away. I really dislike unsolicited advice, and so that's part of that. Yeah, that's true. People. The comment here is that, again, people can't say no or struggle to say no, and then they end up feeling like they're not being heard. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my takeaway from that whole time of my studies was that it really is just better to err on the side of listening without any feedback and clearing my head as much as I can of distracting thought, mm-hmm. right? With my recent ADHD diagnosis and my inability to be treated for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So the second one here is curiosity about other perspectives. You ask questions and seek clarification about others' viewpoints. Instead of dismissing ideas that differ from your own, you show a desire to learn more about them. And that's another way. So, I mean, some of these points are about it's like your own internal compass. How do I know if I'm being open-minded, right? Mm-hmm. I can accept uncertainty. You're comfortable with ambiguity and recognize that not everything is black and white. Open-minded people can tolerate uncertainty and are willing to explore complex issues without needing immediate answers. That's a big thing to me. And the dovetail to that to me is patience, right? In a conversation, like when you're talking with somebody who you're clearly, whatever it is you're saying, they're not 100% getting, but they want to jump to an end. They mm-hmm. want to jump to a conclusion right away because it's almost like they're uncomfortable being in the in-between where they haven't figured out what I'm really trying to say yet. And rather than go through a process of clarifying questions or, the process that we love talking about, what did you hear me say?
Yeah.
Right? Let me see if I got what you meant. Mm-hmm. So we go back and forth until there's clarity. People who are not as open-minded have a hard time doing that. They have a hard time staying without conclusion or staying without judgment for a more extended period of time in a conversation.
Yeah. It can become very uncomfortable, I've noticed. And even for myself, sometimes at the end, after going through a sort of processing moment where I'm trying to verbalize what's in my head, I'm like, wait, did that make sense? And I say that out loud, and people are like, well, yeah, but it also doesn't have to,
Yeah.
It doesn't need to make sense. Sometimes just the process of that stream of consciousness, they do it in writing, but stream of consciousness speaking
when you speak, yeah.
is just as helpful in that situation.
I get that. I do think, though, that when I speak, even if someone's giving me the space to like stream of consciousness process, mm-hmm. which is what happens for me, I still want to feel like I made sense. Mm-hmm. That I got to a place where there was like sort of, I guess, sense or a through line to the things that I mm-hmm. said, that there was a reason and I didn't just sound crazy, because I can do that too.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's helpful to ask questions and mm-hmm. to just keep continuing that as a process within all relationships, giving space to people to speak and to say what they need to say. And if something doesn't make sense, knowing that it's totally okay to be like,
yeah,
can you actually re-say that for me? Because
yes.
the language you used actually didn't make sense for me.
And who knows? Maybe it might not have made sense to anybody, but I think it's safer. It's like kinder to just keep it to that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe you could find some other words. And I do that sometimes with people when have you ever talked to somebody where they say something and you didn't understand it, and then you ask for clarification and they say the same thing again in the exact same words?
Ask for yes,
right. It's like they say the same thing again in the same exact words.
You just said that.
Yeah, and right, and then it's like, but you're right, Hurricane, repeated in a different way, and then sometimes I've had people just say the same exact thing again, only louder, like as if yelling at me was going to make it clearer to me. So,
yeah, that doesn't help me at all.
Yeah, it doesn't help me either.
Like if you're going to use that tone, it's like, actually, I'm not going to understand nothing. I'm going to reverse understand. I'm going to go back to 20 minutes ago. Like, actually.
Yeah, that's very, very true. All right, and so the next one here is acceptance of uncertainty. You're comfortable with ambiguity and recognize that not everything is black and white. Oh, wait, I did that one already.
Yes, the next one, I think.
Did I do you ask questions and seek clarification
Yes.
about others' viewpoints? Oh, okay. So flexibility in thinking. You demonstrate a willingness to change your opinions when presented with new evidence or compelling arguments. If you find yourself reconsidering your stance after hearing new information, this indicates open-mindedness.
That is such a sexy trait. Do you know what I mean, though? Like, if you are in a relationship or friends with somebody, or you know anybody who is like totally able to do that, like you can tell like I know people who are totally able to do that, and I know people who are not able to do that whatsoever, and it is so attractive when people are able to listen to you and then come in with an opinion and listen to you, and then not necessarily because it feels good because it's like, oh, I'm right, but it's like you can see it within their other relationships with other people too. It's like, wow, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So sexy.
Yeah. It's
like, wow, you actually are here
right.
with me.
Like right before this, Joshua said something about Joe Rogan convincing Mark Zuckerberg to become a libertarian.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what that necessarily has to do with this, except to say that if in a conversation with Joe Rogan, somebody like Mark Zuckerberg can change political parties,
I was skeptical.
there's got to be some open-mindedness going on in that
I was like,
conversation
what
somewhere.
source did this come from? And he was like,
Well, it may not have ever happened, but you know.
apparently Zuckerberg said it himself. So I was like, okay, that's a valid source. If the source is the source itself.
If the source is I said I did this, then that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Empathy toward others. You try to understand where others are coming from emotionally and intellectually, even if you disagree with them. This involves putting yourself in their shoes and recognizing their feelings and experiences. Well, that's kind of what you were talking about at the beginning. That even though it can be distracting in terms of your ability to listen, you are trying to put yourself in their shoes and see how it feels to be them from the viewpoint that they're discussing.
Even though you're not them, and you don't have all of the internal understanding of what they are going through, or all the experiences that they've had. So I think that's what makes it the most, like, there's empathy, right? It's all about empathy within that. But there's still, for me, there needs to be a moment where I think that, and I'm like, okay, let me imagine this, but then I can't take too much time doing that.
Well, not while they're still talking.
Exactly.
Because then you're not listening.
Exactly.
It's a lot of work, this listening stuff.
But
again, all of this sort of microcosm of how to communicate comes under the umbrella of how do we determine if we're talking with someone that we're going to want to devote more time, energy, and attention into. Is this a relationship? Is this someone that you want to give your time, money, and resources to? Your body, your time, your resource. So we do have to do a certain degree of discerning while we're listening, right? I think the kind of listening that comes with like the complete open mind, where I'm really just open heart listening, I mean, it's good everywhere all the time. I'm not saying that it isn't. I do think though that when I'm not exactly certain, like if I'm still in the friend or foe mode as I'm getting to know someone, if I'm still not 100% sure if you're someone that I can even trust, there is a part of me that's evaluating the things that you're saying. I'm trying to stay as open as I can to hearing everything you're saying, but I'm also squaring it against either what I know of you to date, how I feel inside, like what matters to me.
Still vetting them.
Vetting them. Yeah, vetting them. Which is, and then the way that I can, these discernment tools are the ways that I can know if I'm being fair about it. Like if I'm going to dismiss someone, if I'm going to determine that someone is like, I don't want to have anything to do with them going forward, what am I going to base that on? Right? Is it just a stereotype, a judgment, an opinion that's not valid, or have I heard enough information, compared it to some information, and come to a conclusion that for me, you're not someone that I would like to spend a lot of time getting close to?
That's a huge math equation to do.
It is a math equation.
While also listening.
Yes. So avoidance of dogmatism. You do not cling rigidly to your beliefs or opinions. Instead, you acknowledge that there may be multiple valid viewpoints on an issue. Open-minded individuals are less likely to label opposing views as wrong completely wrong. For me, this is the agree to disagree clause, right? Like, we don't have to agree, but just because our opinion isn't the same doesn't mean one of us is right and the other one is wrong, right? It's possible that we could both be right, or we could both be right in different situations. But I definitely know I'm being more closed-minded, or I'm with someone who's being more closed-minded if a conversation gets down to an insistence on who's right, especially if we're not in complete agreement about something. So
Yeah.
I think that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it definitely depends on the situation.
Like, what do you mean?
Like, of course, there's not always going to be a who's right, who's wrong, black or white answer. But sometimes there is a person who is in some scenarios, there is going to be a person who is on the more, actually, that was probably a better choice or a better option side of things.
I mean, are we talking about like moral situations?
Are we talking about betting? Is that what we're still in the?
We're just essentially
yes,
talking
sure.
about like,
Then again, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about the
yeah,
situation.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's situational.
Being dogmatic means I believe what I believe only, and anything that doesn't square with what I believe is wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a lack of open-mindedness, because you believe that your situation, what you believe, is what's right, not just a viewpoint that you hold as being one of other viewpoints that could exist in the world, which is a more open-minded way to be.
Well, there we go. See, I didn't know what dogmatism was.
Dogmatism, yeah.
And
Dogmatism means like, if you're a flat earther, like if you believe that the earth is flat, you believe that, and you believe that everybody else is wrong.
Oh.
You can't hold open
okay.
the possibility that maybe the earth isn't flat. Right?
Interesting.
Just like, I mean, there's plenty of places where...
So it's like being stubborn.
It's being very stubborn. Thank you. I have a friend who refuses to disagree on anything, and I just let him. Stubborn, exactly, right? Because what else can you do with people like that? Is to just be like, okay, but there's a limit. There's a limit to how far you can go with someone, I feel like, when the only viewpoint that they can hold is their own.
Like within a relationship.
Yeah,
oh, yeah,
any
100%,
kind of relationship.
100%.
Those are the people who are not close to me. Those are the people that, like, I might like you, or you might be a friend of a friend, but I'm not going to go out of my way to spend a lot of time with you.
Because they're not actually listening.
No. That's listening with an agenda. Scorpios, but I love them anyway. Very funny. You guys crack me up. Let's see. Reflection on your own biases. You regularly examine your own beliefs and biases, questioning how they might influence your perceptions of situations or people. This self-awareness is crucial for maintaining an open mind.
Sorry, I have to read things sometimes. Listening doesn't do me any good.
Mm-hmm.
You breathe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, travel is not comfortable whatsoever for me at all.
What is?
Traveling.
Oh yeah?
I've realized, like, when I travel, and I travel pretty often to pretty to lots of places that are not close to the U.S., I've found that it's only becoming more and more uncomfortable.
And why is it? What is it? And this has to do with biases?
Well, it says you embrace opportunities that challenge your existing beliefs or comfort zones. Whether you're through travel.
No, we're up here.
Oh my God,
Reflection
I'm so
on-
sorry. I'm hitting a wall, major wall.
Well, you finished working all day. You don't. If you need to.
You're like, actually, if you need to go.
If you need to sit, I roped her, and she said, "Do you want to do the call?" I said, "Sure, come do the call with me."
I said, "Do you need help?"
with no mind to the fact that she's
No,
been
just
working
continue.
all day.
I'll be quiet.
No, you're good. You're good. No, so
Sorry.
we're talking about biases. You're going to come back to this one because I want to hear what you had to say about travel. Thank you. See, Hurricane Master sent you a light bulb.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And if anyone wants to send me a corgi, you can do that too. Christina.
She's a big quirky fan. The corgis. So a reflection on your own biases. That's like advanced stuff to me. That you can be aware of your own propensity to look at something less than factually or less than objectively, right? Because I think we all have them, right? We all have biases, but I think it's harder. Look what you've got.
Yes.
A little butt shake. Thank you. Whoever
Thank
sent
you.
the
It was
corgi.
definitely
It was
fatal yours.
yours.
She always sends the corgis.
That was awesome. Thank you.
I
yours.
needed that. I feel so much more recharged.
Yeah. So I really think that it's a high level quality to be able to understand that you have biases, to stay aware of what they are, to regularly evaluate your viewpoint on things, and understand that at any point maybe you could use an adjustment yourself in terms of the way you see something. And when you don't feel like that, like, it's so funny. It's like all of the places where people can't and don't do these things are people who don't have as open a mind, and they don't know that they don't.
And it's so hard because you realize that they're the only person that can realize it themselves. And there's going to be maybe that one person or one event or scenario or experience in which that something clicks for them, but you also realize that it's after watching, especially if you're in a relationship with somebody who does that, that's like, it's just like you're not going to be the key if you've said it so many times, you know.
Yeah. But I also think it's because I checked out for a second while you were talking, because I do that all the time. So part of what I do here is I tap the hearts, because it's like a fit. I finally understood fidget spinner or whatever.
Oh my god!
When
fidget spinners came out, my brother and I went to like 20 7-Elevens because they were all sold out. It was pretty fun. Core memory.
Wow. Yeah.
Anyway.
The comment here is you can only take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Exactly. And yet at the same time, these things are benchmarks to use for ourselves to see how open-minded we're being or staying, or how much room there is to grow in terms of open-mindedness. My dad, who was not very open-minded, used to say something. He used to make some crass comment about it. If you open your mind, then your brains will fall out.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's pretty.
I'm. It's stunning that I've made it this far in life.
You're doing great.
Thanks. So here we are. Openness to new experiences. You embrace opportunities that challenge your existing beliefs or comfort zones, whether through travel, meeting new people, or engaging in discussions about unfamiliar topics. So now tell us about your travel. Because not everybody has the opportunity to travel the way you have.
Yeah.
Into different countries and cultures. And
I've been very lucky. I had always wanted to travel growing up, so when I moved away to school, I made it an immediate priority to try to travel abroad and to change all of my credits over to a school far away from the U.S. Probably, you know, as another coping mechanism, thinking that running would also help my situation instead of sitting with myself and introspecting. But that's besides the point.
Hey, listen, your geographics sound a whole lot better than mine.
But yeah, so ever since I lived abroad and studied in London for a couple of years, my father, who had never left the U.S. for 58, 60 years, decided, you know, well, this is the time. So he kind of got this travel bug. So we've been going around traveling like twice a year. Our last trip was pretty awesome. We were in Morocco and Portugal, and now we're planning a trip to Australia. We're gonna go see, hopefully, I want to go see Lizzie. If Lizzie doesn't come on these, but she comes to the Beyond the Collar calls. And she's
nice.
She's an American who lives in Australia. So I was
how
thinking,
exciting!
I don't understand. She's probably like, Natalie's going to Australia and she hasn't told me, but she's thinking about seeing me.
She's like, oh, I didn't know she was coming.
Surprise!
Yeah, right?
But
I'll have to tell her on Tuesday.
But yeah, so I've had a pretty vast travel experience, and it continues, and I feel so lucky and so grateful every time I get to go and experience all these new cultures and meet all these new people and try all the new foods. It's very important to me.
Yes.
But it's the more and more I become present of who I am and introspect with who I am, the more uncomfortable I am with traveling or being in those new places in those new cultures, because it's a lot of the places recently have been so different to what I grew up to, what I'm used to, like within religion, within how women are treated in these countries, how people act, safety. Like it's a lot of presence that I'm not used to, and a lot of newness that I'm not used to, and then also, you know, experiencing it with my dad and my brother, who I don't often see, yet I'm living with them, and then they're also experiencing it, and they're not as present of it, so they're, you know, they get in their moods, but they don't realize that it's because of all the newness, on top of, you know, some things that I don't know about what they're experiencing. But it's wonderful, and it's hard to remain open when it's so uncomfortable, I guess, what the standpoint is. But it's worth it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's interesting. I've never heard that viewpoint about international travel, but it makes a lot of sense because we get fairly entrenched here in the way that we are and how we think about things, and there's like a lot of people in a lot of places doing things a lot different than we do.
Yeah, and I came home from my last trip when I was talking to one of my best friends, and she was like, "Natalie, you always come home and you're upset, and you call me 5 days before you come home and you're upset, and I just want to tell you, you're in a new place with new people, with new culture, with all these new things, and you're with your parents, and you're like, how can you expect yourself to feel comfortable and safe and within the more, I guess I could say, comfortable emotions? I mean, yes, they're going to come and they're going to go, but the waves are going to be a little more intense because there's a lot more processing."
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But of course, then there's the food.
Oh my God, so worth it.
Yeah,
so worth it for
her
the
last trip. My goal was, please send me pictures of all of the delicious food, and she did.
She's like, I haven't received a text from you in a couple of days, but can you send me pictures of food? And I was like, yes, I can make the submission. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, dessert.
It was beautiful. Some of it was so beautiful.
Oh my God, so good.
Yeah, and then the commentary was awesome.
Anyway.
So, comment here, my cousin was in the Peace Corps and then taught English in France and Italy for a few years, then came back for a year and then tried going back to Italy but was uncomfortable. Interesting. Yeah.
It's a lot of shifts, and in the beginning, when I first started going around, it wasn't that much of a difficulty.
What, have you been to increasingly different cultures?
The first country that I went to outside of the U.S. when I was 19 was Israel. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah, but Israel because of dance.
Yes,
it wasn't just like a target on a map. It were like throwing a dart on a map. You chose it for a reason.
I did choose it for a reason,
yeah.
But that didn't necessarily make it any
less jarring.
Yes.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I was in Israel, and I can imagine that.
And I was also there during COVID.
Yeah.
And I stayed there during COVID. Which was not, I would have made that same decision over again. So.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Anyway.
Sorry. A rabbit hole. Thank you for your indulgence of that rabbit hole. So that was it. So by assessing these behaviors and attitudes in ourselves during various situations, we can gauge whether we are approaching things from an open mind or if there are tendencies towards closed-mindedness. So that was the open-minded part of this discussion. So the next thing is, what preconceived notions or stereotypes might I bring into an interaction, and how can I set them aside? So the first thing is, what is a preconceived notion? It's an opinion formed beforehand without adequate evidence. And I didn't think to... okay, here it is, stereotype. Widely held but fixed and oversimplified images or ideas of a particular type of person or thing, right? So a preconceived notion is it being an opinion formed beforehand. Like the fact that you would go into something with an already formed opinion is evidence of closed-mindedness right off the top. Like if I don't even know you and I don't know anything about you, or you come into my sphere, but and a lot of times preconceived notions happen with stereotypes right away. Fixed and oversimplified images or ideas of a particular type of person or thing. And a lot of that has to do with, exactly right, the comment here is, it's like thinking all women of one race are a certain way. It's like thinking all of anybody is a certain way. Mm-hmm. It's like
it's all categorizing.
Yeah, like by very shallow markers. By gender, by race, by orientation, by look, by height. I mean, there's incredibly shallow things. I'll call them shallow. That's my judgment. There's incredibly shallow things that sometimes people can judge people by, or sort of categorize people by, that have not. I mean, literally, and a lot of it has to do with your own background and how much you know about your own wiring, right? Like literally, I know people who like don't trust short people.
Well, okay, so is it a preconceived notion if you don't know that you're making it? Or that's just trauma? Maybe it's trauma-based preconceived notion.
Maybe there's trauma that's making you make it, but whether you know it or not, if you go into a situation with, you're going to meet someone and you've already decided X, Y, or Z about them without even hearing from them, it's a preconceived notion.
The beauty of introspection.
Yes. And the comments here is that it's trauma that probably does that. It can be trauma, it can be ignorance. I was raised by very bigoted, ignorant men in my family who I'm sure had trauma, because everyone in my lineage of people have and did. But I do still think that in their cases, bigotry is not always a trauma response. Bigotry is just a severe form of closed-mindedness that people are willing to sit with. I never agreed. My dad was in construction. We lived here in New York. He worked in the different trades. He worked in the different unions, and he would come home, and I will never recount the words, but every ethnic type of person that can be referred to by an ethnic slur were the words I heard in my house growing up. I heard them at dinner. I heard this one and that one and this category and that category, and it was always wrong to me. I didn't know necessarily what one would do different.
Yeah.
But it never seemed right to me to be that way. And a lot of times those things can be as simple as you hear somebody says something, like if a certain type of ethnic person or gender, whatever, is portrayed to you as being a certain kind of way, and you're not sure, and then you meet one person who is, then suddenly you dismiss the whole category because that's what you were told. Like you take the one piece of that's what you were told and you measure it against, oh, see, there's this one example of, therefore they all must be. It's like it's like fallacious reasoning.
So everybody has preconceived notions, or most people, but it's about coming to an awareness of what they are and actually questioning them to match up to if you believe it or not. Well, actually, I mean, if it's like that black or white, then you have to say like, oh, actually, this is not the case. Like everybody can't fit into this one category that I've been told or have been programmed to think.
Right.
So it's more of having an awareness and an open mind to those preconceived notions that you know about, or the ones that you actually aren't aware of yet.
Yes. Yeah. And that in and of itself is a degree of open-mindedness. Do I know that I struggle with, that I must, because I'm human, struggle with preconceived notions, and what are my preconceived notions?
Acceptance with action.
Acceptance with action.
Accepting that you have preconceived notions, and then acting on the building awareness around what it is and how you can reframe them.
What you think. Yeah, like how you see things. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Hurricane Master, exactly. Like being born in apartheid and that you're raised with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I struggled with that a lot. Is it crazy that I don't know what apartheid is? Sorry. I can explain it to you later. It's a very terrible part in the history of South Africa, and it's very race based. I told you about the teachers from my school. The one that I couldn't finish were both white Afrikaners from that period of time. Okay, this is about the race. Yes, it's about the race thing. Yeah, okay. And I didn't know what the teachers of that school were both guilty of all of these things by virtue of how they were raised. They thought themselves to be very spiritual and very open-minded, and they were in fact not. And I do think that one of the ways that you can know, one of these things that you can, how you know where your open-mindedness is to the degree to which you're able to hold yourself to account for the things you think and feel and then ultimately say. Right? Like my dad thought he was one of the most open-minded people on earth, and as you've already heard me describe, he was not. But the fact that he thought he was, the fact that if you're convinced, and the things that he was saying were so the opposite. Yes, that's like yes. But to the degree that you're convinced you're open-minded, you probably want to rethink that, right? But these are all the things we're going over today are ways that are ways to help promote open-mindedness in ourselves. Yes. Hurricane Master, I would love to have a chat with you offline about that whole situation. I believe that it probably is harder to break that cycle now. And I would love to talk with you more about that if you were open to that. So what are some stereotypes? Morals and values that, how do you know, right? Your morals and values don't align. When there is friction between two individuals in a conversation that don't align with one another, both wanting to make their point and not being heard when it comes to their core morals and values being challenged, right? So that's one way that I think that we're talking about how we're engaging with stereotypes and preconceived ideas, right? That's hard. Yeah. And when it comes down to morals and values, something as fundamental as that, I think in some ways, like, there ends up having to be an agree to disagree. Like, if I take a lot of time, and I have over my life, to develop my sense of what my morals and my values are. And yet, they have evolved over time, right? But it's a harder argument. Like, you know, like...
Morals, sorry, just to clarify, morals is more of a belief system, and values is, like, characteristics of that all.
Yeah, morals are sort of what you believe in terms of, like, inherent right and wrong. As opposed to ethics, right? Ethics are laws.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Rules of right or wrong that maybe are not... Morals are like, what do you honestly, like, what are your beliefs about right or wrong?
Yeah.
Like,
okay,
stealing is wrong, but if someone's starving and you steal to feed them because that's your moral thing, right? So that we can get into a whole argument. We've had arguments about that, right? Well, not arguments, but conversations and discussions about morals and values and characteristics and ethics and stuff. But values are more like, I think, the way you act or the actions that you take in the world that reflect your morals.
Yes.
Yeah. But when you're talking about things like that, when you're talking about morals with someone and then there's friction, I think those can be really hard conversations to have.
I think conversations like that, it's just to gain insight. It's more so to gain understanding of the other person's perspective and the point of view, and not to have a debate about whose morals, ethics, or values are better than one another. That's the agree to disagree conversation. But let me explain your belief system around that, because I have a different one. Here's mine, but I'm curious to hear how you make decisions based off of this and where you came from and how you built that foundation. Like, that's an interesting conversation.
How very open-minded of you.
Oh my God.
Yes, exactly. Yes. The comment here is
validation.
Morals are equal to individual, and ethics are apply to groups, and that's another good way of looking at it too. Some people do judge others' morals and values and try to change how they have their point of view, and that happens too. And I think that the viewpoint that Natalie just described is the one that is a little kinder and more open-minded, is to say, it sounds like my values or my morals are a little different than yours, but tell me more about yours so I can understand what they are and how you came to be that way, right? And then you can still agree. Tell me more about yours so I can understand what they are and how you came to be that way, right? And then you can still agree to disagree and walk away.
Or you can build a relationship off of that.
Or you can. Right?
Out of your differences.
That's true. Okay, so age. When a person is way younger or older, there may arise stereotypes about not knowing information or not being through what someone older has been through, or there may also be a lack of understanding and life experience. We laugh about that all the time.
That's hard.
That's right.
We have some age gaps
We
in
have
this
some
house.
age gap things. We have some things that get quite funny, like, you mean TVs weren't developed in the 90s?
Oh my God, so funny. So that was funny.
That was funny.
So yesterday we were watching Requiem for a Dream because we had an event a couple Saturdays ago where we were doing impact to movie sound scores, and one of the incredible sound scores is from Requiem for a Dream. They're like dun dun dun, and I was like, oh my God, we should watch that movie, because I don't think you've ever seen it.
I had never seen it.
I'd seen it like twice in high school. The first time I watched it, I was like, this is an awesome movie, and the second time I watched it, I ended up having to stop like midway through because I had heart palpitations. And for some reason, we stopped. We stopped because we were.
It's very intense. It's very hard to sit through. And it was made in 2000, and it's what they call a period piece. And Natalie didn't necessarily understand it. Right?
I was like, no, it was like from.
It's from 2000, but the movie was not set in 2000. The movie was set in the 70s.
And then right away, I said, like, well, movies only started coming out in the 90s anyway, or
TV
television.
So they only had television in the 90s.
And then I was like, no, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Looked at her like, what?
And then I was like, no, that doesn't make sense, because movies, Charlie Chaplin in the 20s, but my initial thought was like, wait, no, like movies started in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was really stupid.
It was pretty funny. It was pretty cute. But we don't judge, we just laugh. It's pretty fun. And then there are times, like, I'm older by a little bit than a lot of people in my world, and sometimes conversations get going that have to do with age things, and I just stay quiet. Don't say a word. But it's fun. Unexperienced. So using lifestyle as an example for this one, when you or someone you meet doesn't have the same experience as the other, judgment might arise, or in some standpoints even be made fun of. Being treated as less of a person, or sorry to say, but you're like a child that doesn't know much. Yeah, like we would never. I mean,
Never.
It's only ever in fun when you say something like that, right? And then we usually like I step in and say something that I can from my own life experience, which is, where, because we even talked about it, like because you had asked about the questions, because in the movie, there's TV that's watched. TV's a big part of the show, of the movie itself, right? The
one of the
mother, one of the storylines, she watches a ton of TV, and a lot of what she watches is this like sort of a modern day for the time, like televangelist thing, like a preacher type, and she would watch late at night. Now, when I was young, TV programming happened like between the morning and then late at night. Like at 10 o'clock, a lot of the major network channels would say it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? And literally they would go off air. Yeah. There would be no TV after 10 or 11 o'clock at night on some channels. And then on some of the later channels, they would have, like when QVC became a thing, when you could shop online, or not online, we didn't have it online, when you could shop over television, some of those programs would air in like the middle of the night, right? Yeah. But there was no regular television programming back then. Mm-hmm. And I mean,
I thought there were reruns because I knew everything was scheduled.
Reruns came later,
but only in the movie they kept showing just that televangelist and then like QVC stuff. So I was like, did people just like turn the TV on when they were bored just to watch that? Because that sounds.
Well, that would happen. I mean, I had a friend who used to
really
talk
boring.
About. Well, it was really boring.
Where was TikTok? You know what I mean?
Yes. No, but yes.
Where were 24-year-olds at?
Where were the 24-year-olds at? Well, we were doing other things by then that had nothing to do with TV or anything.
Anyway, vetting and discernment.
Did not know that. Yes, like that. Yeah.
Discernment of Natalie, television, and history is not valid. Historical knowledge. Do not go to her for it. Discerned.
Too funny. All right, so race and skin color. Individuals that are biased based on racial background, leading to generalizations about behaviors, intelligence, or capabilities. So that speaks for itself. We
don't need
to. That's something that I wish we could all get over, but we haven't, and I don't know when or if we're ever gonna. But okay, so then gender roles, influences, expectations regarding communication styles, emotional expression, professional abilities. This is such a hard one, right? This can also lead into identification of oneself, someone that identifies as cis, non-binary, or transgendered. Judgment and or stereotypes may arise regarding who you are as a person, and misjudgment might happen. Body shaming can also arise in these conflict conversations. It can also be talked about sexual identification and being in situations where people who are homophobic or make remarks, or you just haven't found the right person yet, or being like all
There's
of
a lot
these
in that.
Gender orientation, all of that
expression.
stuff. There's so much. It's hard.
You have to tease that all apart.
Yeah,
like
you do have to.
That
That's
falls
like a
into
whole
gender
other,
roles. That's like a whole.
That's a whole other conversation that we could have just about that. Because unfortunately, there are places where people are affected by those things in terms of the things they think and the experiences they've had, and we speak sometimes from those places. But it's really hard to have to for all of us to stay out of stereotyping, judging, and oversimplifying.
And I think
oversimplifying is what happens around that stuff.
And I think specifically within this gender roles umbrella, which it says like a lot of stuff, there's a lot of trauma surrounding a lot of those topics in there, like having the sexual orientation and identification, and then the gender itself, and what you choose to be, and
body shaming. My own journey around that is no exception. I mean, I'll keep it to myself. Like I had ridiculous crushes on girls when I was in elementary school, but I didn't know it and I didn't understand it. And then a crush cropped up on a boy in the 6th grade, and so I was like, oh, all right. And so then I literally just in some little 12-year-old kind of brain decided to just do that. because that's what everybody does, right? Girls are with boys. That's like the thing, right? And so I ran around as straight for a good part, for all of my 20s, like, while I drank and did crazy stuff. I would like occasionally have like, I have a few crazy stories about ending up with women like in drunken whatever, and because that was the only time I could ever take the lid off of that. And then when I got sober, I realized that maybe part of my problem had been really that I was gay and that I just hadn't, dealt with it. So then I did this whole coming out thing, and I was gay, and it was great, and blah, blah, blah. And then in sobriety, in the march forward, another boy showed up in my life that I actually had real feelings for that I couldn't deny. And I was mad at God at that point. I was like, are you kidding? Do I really have to do this now? So then I had to reckon with, like, what does it mean to be, like, bisexual or something other than straight or gay? And I mean to tell you that there's tons of people in both camps that want to tell you there's something wrong with you, that you don't know, that you're just confused, that you don't want to make a decision. It's way harder to come out as bisexual than it is to be straight or gay, in my estimation, for my personal experience. Maybe that's not everybody's experience.
I think that's like the ultimate gray zone identification, and people have a hard time with gray zones because of all this preconceived notions and stereotyping stuff. And that goes into the whole label conversation as well. It's like if you fall and categorize yourself as this, we can even say within the kink community, like a slave or a switch, and you do something that isn't necessarily a preconceived notion of that, then it's like, well, you're not actually that, and then you get questioned,
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
And then it's like, I'd rather not label myself at all, but then you get a preconceived notion because then you're in the gray zone, and people have a hard time with gray zones. I love a gray zone.
Exactly. Yes. Trying to explain pansexuality is not a treat, right? Yeah. And it's like the easiest way through that is I stopped trying to feel like I had to explain myself to anyone anymore.
Exactly.
I think that is one of the liberties of getting older, is I don't owe an explanation to anyone about anything.
Yeah, I have a friend who's Russian, and she just sometimes says like she just speaks to them in Russian, so they kind of think that she doesn't understand English. I love her. That's her way of
just like dismissing.
Just dismissing it.
I like
not
that.
disassociating, but dismissing.
Just dismissing. Yeah, I like that. I would. I like that. Go Google awesome. It, then come back to me and we can have a conversation. Ooh, that's tough. I like that. Socioeconomic status. Judgments may arise from preconceptions about wealth or poverty, or that affect how individuals view each other's motivations or values. That's another thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's a good comment. I'm just saying I'm not into you, if that's what you're asking. I love it.
Are you flirting?
I love that. That's awesome.
Dismissing me is my kink.
I'm not into you. I love that. Yeah, so then cultural backgrounds. Different cultural norms can lead to misunderstandings if one assumes that their own cultural practices are the standard. Welcome to being an American. I did not have a bad time when I went to France because my partner at the time spoke some French, and we didn't go into France expecting everyone to speak English. And when people say that the French are, not friendly, my experience was French is the national language of France, right?
Yeah.
And when Americans come in blustering around with their English like they expect everyone to be able to speak it, certain people take the attitude that, like, I'm sorry, do you not know where you are? You're in my country. In my country, we speak French. And that's not an inappropriate response, I don't think, right?
I don't think so either. I always try to go to a new country just knowing hello, thank you, order a coffee. That's very important. But just like 3 things, just to show like I came with an understanding. Like I didn't come trying to just be an American, and not that it's not okay
but
to
it's
do
a
that.
big
But
deal. No, but it's.
But
yes.
People love when you like people from other countries love when you like show appreciation for being in another country and don't just we're all spry.
Exactly.
Like my father does with taking photos places. So you can take a photo, but don't look like a tourist while you're taking a photo.
That's so funny.
But then I have to be like, no, like, this is an experience too. But in dangerous scenarios, I'm like, yo, put your phone away.
That's so funny.
It's pretty funny.
All right, so
We love you, France. If anyone's here watching from France.
Yes, I do.
Bonjour.
I loved Paris. If I could speak French, I would be living in Paris right now. But French completely escapes me. It was very sad because I thought Paris was the coolest place ever.
Paris was cool.
But so the past. Yes, this is a preconceived notion. People tending to bring in the past or past conversations to get a reaction, to prove to be right, even when not, and not enough evidence is present, or other intentions that might hurt someone because of the lack of evidence or their own point of something, their own viewpoint of something. So making assumptions is a huge preconceived notion, which can then also stem from overthinking or the lack of communication. So then, with not any too many minutes to spare, let's get to the how to set aside preconceived notions and stereotypes. We always do this, like all of the how to be better at this stuff comes at the ends of the notes, right?
Well, we have lots of experience in making mistakes and doing things that we need to work on, so let's...
Exactly. So practice active listening. Focus on truly hearing what the other person is saying rather than formulating a response while they speak. It helps create a more open dialogue. Ask questions. Instead of making assumptions based on stereotypes, ask clarifying questions that allow for deeper understanding of the individual's perspective. Challenge your assumptions. When you notice a stereotype creeping into your thoughts, consciously challenge it by seeking evidence that contradicts it. That's a good one.
Action.
Yeah, I like that. Engage with diverse perspectives. Actively seek out interactions with people from different backgrounds. Exposure can help dismantle stereotypes by humanizing those who might otherwise be viewed through a biased lens. Cultivate empathy. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Understanding their experience can help mitigate bias and foster connection. Because really, besides all of it, we are all more alike than we are different. It's just you have to be willing to see that, I think. Continuous learning and growth. Educate yourself, read literature from diverse authors, attend workshops focused on diversity training, or engage in community discussions that promote inclusivity. Seek feedback. Encourage others to provide feedback on your interactions. This can reveal blind spots you may not be aware of regarding your biases. I have gone through, and I can't even speak about it in too many words because I'm really self-conscious about it. But there was a period of time where I found out that I was dangerously close to being like what they call a Karen. I didn't know it. I didn't understand it. And people literally had to beat some stuff over my head for me to get it and to see it and for me to amend my behavior and not say ridiculously stupid things that I now know are ridiculously stupid. So it's really important to be open and to be able to hear people say, maybe you ought to think about that a different way, or maybe you might find a different way to talk about that, or maybe that's not really true. And
Yeah.
it's not
It's
easy.
not easy at all.
No, it's not easy. In fact, that when I ran into someone recently who had apparently worked for me some years ago, she had accused me of being rude and racist, and it was hard to hear. But on reflection, I know that it was during that period of time, and I know that it's possible that I had come across racist, despite any intention. I have never felt like I am on the inside, but I was saying things that indicated otherwise on the outside if I had known any better.
Yeah.
So
and the
it's tough.
the best thing to do in that situation is to apologize and be like, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And
well,
I
that's
didn't-
exactly what I
And I
did.
don't remember, but validate their experience and but don't take it as a hit, but just take it as this is where I'm at now, like you did.
Yeah, I did. That's how I handled it. So Saturday's topic, thank you for putting it in the chat. Give yourself time to reflect on the information you've gathered. Consider how it aligns with your values and expectations. When and how much time can I set aside to reflect on the information? So we're going to talk about how to evaluate information, how much time to spend on it, and when we know, when we know that we've in fact invested enough time. I think we're going to have a conversation about when we're between 40 and 70.
Oh, on what, Saturday?
On Saturday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
40 and 70.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be listening for that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I edit all the videos, but I don't get to listen to all of them.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us again. Thank you to those of you who joined us for the first time. Thank you to those of you who are here all the time. It's wonderful to see you. I tell you all the time, and I mean it, how much it means to me that you're all here. And we will see you on Saturday.
Thanks for
at
having
6.
me.
Thanks for coming.